I found out my wife was cheating with her boss behind my back. Then she deepened the betrayal by stealing $250, $0 from our joint account and trying to claim the house. Our dream home worth $500,000 was hers in a legal fight we've just begun. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating on him. But here I am, sitting in my living room, staring at the receipts and texts that tore my world apart in less than a week. It all started with little things. She'd come home late more often, always claiming work was stressful, or she'd say she was out with her girl gang. But I noticed her phone was never far from her hand, and every time I asked about her day, she'd brush me off with a fake smile and a quick change of subject. Then came the strange texts. I'd caught her sneaking her phone into the bathroom once, and I saw a message from her boss, Jeffrey, that made my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Let's make it special." My first gut instinct was that she was just talking about work, but I knew better. Women don't just text that casually with their boss unless something was going on. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I kept my suspicions to myself, watching, waiting for more signs. A few days later, I decided to check her emails, something I don't normally do, but I'd become obsessed with finding proof. What I saw was worse than I imagined. There were dozens of emails between her and Jeffrey, filled with flirtatious language, things like "can't wait to see you again," "you're the only person who gets me," and even plans to meet after hours at the office. They were clearly more than just colleagues. My heart sank. I felt betrayed, angry, and completely useless. How could she lie so openly? How could she pretend everything was okay while she was sneaking around with her boss? That night, I confronted her. I didn't yell or scream, I just showed her the emails. She froze, her face turning white. "That's not what you think," she said quickly, trying to brush it off. "Jeffrey and I are just friends, it's purely professional." I could see the panic in her eyes, the way she fidgeted, trying to deny the obvious. I told her I knew about the affair, and her reaction was priceless. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're overreacting. You're just jealous because I work hard and deserve some fun. Maybe you're not enough for me anymore." Her words hit hard like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I asked her directly if she was sleeping with Jeffrey, and she it. Yet her tone was defensive, almost guilty. I knew she was lying. The betrayal didn't stop there. As I sat there staring at her, I realized she wasn't just cheating, she was stealing from us. I've been noticing discrepancies in the bank statements lately, small withdrawals at first, then larger sums. I thought maybe she was just spending more, but the numbers didn't add up. I decided to dig deeper into our joint account. What I found made my blood boil. Over the past month, she'd withdrawn $250, $0, half of our savings, without telling me. She'd transferred it into some offshore account, claiming she needed it for an investment, but I knew better. It was her way of covering her tracks, probably to hide her affair, or maybe even to prepare for a big fight. When I confronted her about the money, she shrugged and said, "It's none of your business. I can do whatever I want with my money." That's when I realized she was willing to lie, cheat, and steal, all in the name of her own happiness, or whatever the hell she called it. I felt humiliated, furious, and betrayed all at once. I'd dedicated years of my life to building a life with her, only to find out she'd been lying, cheating, and stealing behind my back. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about everything: her betrayal, the money, the house we fought so hard for, now possibly slipping away. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was spinning, and I could feel the rage boiling inside me. I knew I had to act, but I also knew I needed a plan. This wasn't just about catching her, it was about taking back control of my life. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't look at her the same way. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by this cold, scheming version who lied and betrayed me so easily. I knew I had to act fast, not just to protect what was ours, but to make her pay for the pain she'd caused. I stayed up all night, going over every detail, every dollar stolen, every excuse she'd thrown at me. I felt humiliated, furious, and absolutely betrayed. The house, our supposed dream home, suddenly felt like a prison, a symbol of her lies. The next morning, I decided I needed answers, and I needed them now. I called a private investigator I'd researched for months. I told him to follow her, dig into her finances, and find out if she was really sleeping with Jeffrey or anyone else. I wanted proof, hard, undeniable evidence. I also started pulling together all the financial documents I could find, making copies of every bank statement, every transfer, every suspicious expense. I'd been naive to trust her with our money, but now I saw her for what she was, a con artist who'd been stealing from us right under my nose. While I waited for the Pie's report, I decided to confront her again. I needed to hear her lie to my face, to see how far she'd go to. Deny everything. That afternoon, I sat her down in the living room. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting, trying to avoid eye contact. I laid out everything I'd uncovered, her affair, the offshore account, the missing money. Her eyes widened for a second, then she scoffed and said, "You're blowing this out of proportion. You're just paranoid. I was just having some fun with Jeffrey. It doesn't mean anything. You're overreacting because you're insecure." Her tone was dismissive, like she was trying to minimize the pain she'd caused. I stared at her and felt my blood boil. "You stole half our savings," I said coldly. "You lied to my face. You think I'm just going to forget that?" She tried to spin more lies, claiming she needed the money for some business opportunity, but I didn't buy it. The Pie confirmed she'd been meeting Jeffrey regularly, often out of town, and that she'd been funneling money into different accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her lies, the betrayal. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly, steal from us, and then pretend everything was fine? I realized I couldn't keep living like this in a marriage built on deceit. I had to decide whether to fight for her or cut her out of my life entirely. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. This was war, and I was planning my next move. I was done playing nice. The stakes had never been higher, and I knew I had to come up with a plan that would hit her back hard, something she wouldn't see coming. The next few days were a blur. I spent most of my time gathering evidence, making sure I had everything locked down before I made my move. The Pie came through with some explosive info, photos of her with Jeffrey, receipts of hotel stays, even recorded phone calls where she was clearly discussing how to hide the money. It was all in black and white. The hard truth was that my wife, Lisa, had been lying straight to my face for months. She'd been cheating on me, stealing from our joint account, and planning her escape from the life we built together. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind kept circling back to our house, the house we spent years working on, pouring money into, imagining growing old there. Now she was claiming it was hers, trying to take it away in a legal fight. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was a bitchy, manipulative liar, and I was furious. I knew I had to act fast, not just to protect what was mine, but to punish her for all the pain she'd caused. That afternoon, I decided to confront her again. I told her I knew everything, the affair, the money, the lies. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be played anymore. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She shrugged, rolled her eyes, and tried to act innocent. "You're overreacting," she said. "You're just jealous. Jeffrey and I are just having fun. It's not a big deal." She looked at me like I was some kind of fool, like she thought she could lie her way out of this. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I pulled out the evidence I'd collected, screenshots, bank statements, the Pie's report. I laid it all out on the table. Her face turned red, then pale, then angry. "You're crazy," she spat. "You're just jealous because I found someone who actually cares about me. Jeffrey's been good to me, better than you ever were." Her words cut deep, but I knew better. I knew she was just trying to save herself, to spin it all around and make me look like the villain. But I wasn't going to let her. The fight escalated quickly. She accused me of being controlling, insecure, and said I was just jealous of her success. I told her I'd had enough. Enough of her lies, her stealing, her betrayal. I told her I was filing for divorce and taking back what was mine. That's when she snapped. She started crying, claiming she loved me, that she was sorry, that she'd change. But I saw right through her. Sorry doesn't fix betrayal, and I knew her tears were just a tactic to keep me from pulling the trigger on the divorce. Over the next few days, I consulted a lawyer. I wanted to make sure I had all my bases covered: divorce, custody of the house, the division of assets. The lawyer told me I had a solid case, especially with all the evidence I'd gathered. The house, our dream home, was in my name, and I wasn't about to let her steal it from me. The fight over the money was going to be tough, but I was determined to get everything back. I also decided to freeze her accounts, just in case she was planning to make a run for it or hide more money. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a single dime. While I prepared for the legal battle, I also started to realize how much this whole experience had changed me. I trusted her blindly for years, and she betrayed that trust in the worst way. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Relief that I finally knew the truth, and anger that I'd been a fool for so long. But I also knew I wasn't going to let her ruin me. I was going to fight not just for the house or the money, but for my dignity. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking back control of my life, and I wasn't going to let her take that away from me without a fight. Legal process moved faster than I expected. I filed for divorce, and in the papers I listed everything I could prove: her affair, the stolen money, the offshore accounts, even her attempts to claim the house in her name. I wanted everything documented, knowing she'd try to spin things her way. Meanwhile, I kept monitoring her actions. I had a feeling she'd try to hide more money or worse, disappear altogether. I was right to be cautious. One day I caught her trying to access our joint account again. The bank flagged it immediately, and I had her accounts frozen. That was a wake-up call for her. I saw her panic for the first time. She started yelling, accusing me of spying on her, calling me obsessive. But I knew exactly what she was up to. She was trying to cover her tracks, to hide the last bits of her betrayal. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I had already hired a forensic accountant to trace every penny she'd stolen and to find out where she might be hiding the money. Meanwhile, I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her whereabouts. Turns out, she'd been staying at a fancy hotel downtown, meeting Jeffrey often. They'd been planning to run off together. She even had a fake ID and a bag packed with clothes. I found this out from the Pie's footage and recordings. It was like watching a bad movie, but this was real life. She was ready to walk away with her lover and all our money, leaving me with nothing. That was the moment I knew I had to act fast. I went to the lawyer and asked for an emergency order to prevent her from leaving the state or transferring any more assets. The judge granted it, and I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. She was trying to escape, but I wasn't going to let her. I also started preparing for the legal fight over the house. It was clear she was claiming it was hers, trying to push me out through some legal loophole. But I had the title, all the paperwork, and the proof that the house was bought with our joint savings. In the midst of all this chaos, I couldn't help but feel the emotional toll. I was angry, yes, but also heartbroken. I'd trusted her for so many years, and she'd betrayed every ounce of that trust. I kept asking myself how she could be so selfish, lying, cheating, stealing from the one person who loved her unconditionally. My mind kept racing, trying to process it all. I kept replaying the good times, wondering if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her true nature. But deep down, I knew this was the end of our story. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine, and to finally move on from the woman who had become a stranger. The most shocking part: the day I found out she'd been planning her escape, she had the nerve to tell me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid and controlling. That's when I realized she'd been spinning her web of lies so well that even she believed her own bullshit. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I'd seen her true face, and I was determined to make sure she paid for every lie, every dollar stolen, every ounce of pain she'd caused. This wasn't just about money or the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and making her realize she couldn't manipulate her way out of this. By the time I reached the 5th day of everything falling apart, I was exhausted but resolute. The legal battle was heating up, and I had the evidence to back me up. The court documents were in motion: restraining orders, asset freezes, and a clear statement of my claim to the house. I knew Lisa was furious, but she was also panicking. I could tell she was trying to come up with some kind of counterattack, maybe even plan to run again or destroy more evidence. That's when I decided to take a more aggressive approach. I had the forensic accountant dig into every transaction she'd made, every offshore transfer, every suspicious expense. Turns out, she'd funneled most of the stolen money into multiple accounts in different countries, making it almost impossible to track without the right expertise. But the accountant found a trail. Some of the money had gone into a luxury car dealer, some into a series of shell companies, and a chunk was hidden in crypto wallets. I was stunned. My wife Lisa wasn't just cheating on me. She was trying to vanish with our entire savings, nearly $500,000. Meanwhile, I set up a meeting with my lawyer to discuss the next steps. We prepared a motion to seize her assets and get a court order for her to turn over the money she'd stolen. The lawyer told me I was in a strong position legally, especially with all the evidence I had. But I knew Lisa wouldn't go down without a fight. She was already trying to manipulate the situation, claiming I was paranoid and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. I didn't care. I was done trusting her. I wanted her out of my life and out of our assets. The day I got the court order was a victory, at least temporarily. The bank froze her accounts and I got control of the house's legal documents. I also arranged for a sheriff to serve her with the restraining order, preventing her from leaving the state or selling the house. That's when I saw her panic firsthand. She called me crying, begging me to drop the case, saying she'd do anything to make it right. But I wasn't falling for her tears anymore. I told her she'd lost her chance, and I was going to see this through too. The end. I also started preparing for the worst. What if she tried to disappear again? I contacted the airline and border agencies, giving them her details in case she tried to flee. I even called a private security firm to keep an eye on her. I knew she was dangerous now, willing to do anything to hold on to her new life with Jeffrey and the stolen money. My focus had shifted from just catching her to making sure she paid for everything she'd done. That night I sat alone in the house, feeling both victorious and hollow. All the evidence, all the legal moves, they couldn't undo the damage she'd already caused. I'd lost my trust, my savings, and almost the house I loved. But I also realized something else. I was finally free. Free from her lies, her manipulation, her betrayal. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to rebuild, to start fresh. I'd learned the hard way that some people aren't worth fighting for, especially when they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal their way right out of your life. All I could do now was focus on moving forward and making sure she never got another chance to hurt me again. The aftermath of everything was a whirlwind, but honestly I felt a strange sense of relief. The court battles, the investigations, the constant paranoia, they all took their toll, but finally I could breathe again. The judge awarded me full control of the house, and Lisa was ordered to pay back every penny she stole, though I knew that wouldn't be easy. She'd hidden so much of it, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully recover what was lost. Still, I had my dignity, my house, and a resolve I'd never felt before. I cut ties with her completely. No more calls, no more lies, no more betrayal. I moved out of the house she tried to claim as her own and into a new place, somewhere I could start over without the weight of her deception hanging over me. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and some people will do anything to manipulate and destroy what you work so hard for. I also learned that revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about reclaiming your life and standing up for yourself in the face of betrayal. I didn't just want her to suffer. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that she couldn't lie and steal her way out of everything. And in the end, I think I achieved that. Now, I focus on rebuilding, both financially and emotionally. I've started seeing a therapist, not because I need to forget her, but because I need to process what happened and make sure I don't carry this pain forever. I've also been working on restoring my confidence, learning to trust again, but more carefully this time. No more blind faith. I've become a lot more cautious, but I also know I'll be stronger for it. Most importantly, I want anyone reading this to understand one thing. No matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how much it hurts, you have the power to fight back. You don't have to accept being a victim. Sometimes, the only way to win is to take control and make sure the other person pays for their betrayal. It's not about revenge for revenge's sake. It's about justice, about protecting what's yours, and about standing tall when everything else has fallen apart. I hope this story helps someone out there who's going through something similar. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. Because in the end, the truth always comes out, and the person who betrays you will have to face the consequences. I did, and I'm finally starting to rebuild my life, stronger, wiser, and more cautious than ever before.